I was standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning when I saw them through the window. A group of people trampling through my woodland property with tape measures and clipboards. My name is Felix Morrison, and I had purchased 15 acres of mixed woodland and meadow just outside Asheville, North Carolina, about 3 years ago. The property was gorgeous, secluded, and exactly what I needed after 20 years of working as a commercial real estate attorney in Charlotte. I had built a small cabin on the front 2 acres, leaving the back 13 untouched except for some trails I had cleared for hiking. The deed was clear. I owned every square inch of it, free and clear. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the back door, boots crunching on the gravel path. As I got closer, I could hear voices, one particularly shrill, one rising above the others. "This is perfect. We can fit at least 4 units here, maybe 5 if we angle them correctly." I recognized that voice. Patricia Henshaw, the president of the Mountain View HOA. My property was not part of any HOA. I had specifically purchased land that was outside their jurisdiction, a fact I had verified multiple times with my real estate attorney before closing. "Excuse me," I called out, approaching the group of 5 people. "What exactly are you doing on my property?" Patricia turned to face me, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving an inch despite the morning breeze. She was maybe 55, wearing what looked like expensive athleisure wear and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Mr. Morrison, good morning. We are conducting a survey for the community storage project. On my land," I said flatly. "Without my permission." She waved her hand dismissively. "The HOA voted on this project last month. We need additional storage space for community equipment and seasonal items. Your back acreage is perfect." "My property is not part of your HOA." Patricia smiled in that condescending way that made my jaw clench. "Actually, according to our records, the entire Mountain View area falls under our jurisdiction. That includes your property." I pulled out my phone. "Would you like me to show you my deed?" Because it very clearly states that my property is excluded from any homeowner association agreements. One of the men with her, a pudgy guy in his 40s wearing a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it, stepped forward. "Madam, maybe we should check with the county records office." "Nonsense, Derek. I have reviewed the documents myself. Now, Mr. Morrison, if you would kindly stop interfering, we have measurements to complete. The construction crew arrives next week." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Get off my property. Now, all of you." "There is no need to be hostile," Patricia said, making a note on her clipboard. "This is for the good of the community. You will benefit from this as well. I do not want storage sheds on my woodland. I want nature, trees, and wildlife. That is why I bought this property. Now leave before I call the sheriff." Patricia's expression hardened. "If you interfere with this project, we will be forced to fine you for non-compliance with HOA regulations, $500 per day. You cannot fine me. I am not a member of your HOA." She turned to the group. "Continue with the measurements. Mr. Morrison, you will be hearing from our attorney." I stood there, furious but calculating. I could call the sheriff right now, but that would just escalate things temporarily. I needed to handle this properly. As a lawyer, I knew better than to let anger drive my decisions. "Document everything," I called out. "Because when this ends up in court, I want a record that I told you to leave." I pulled out my phone and started recording video. Patricia noticed and her face pinched. "There is no need for that." "There is every need. You are trespassing on private property after being explicitly told to leave by the owner. Keep going, please. My attorney will love this." The group looked uncomfortable now, exchanging glances. The man named Derek cleared his throat. "Patricia, maybe we should verify the property lines before we go any further." The property lines are not in question, she snapped. Mr. Morrison is simply being difficult as usual. As usual, I said. I have barely spoken to you or your HOA since I moved here. You have refused to participate in community events, ignored our welcoming committee, and declined to contribute to neighborhood initiatives. Your attitude has been noted. Because I am not part of your neighborhood, my property borders your development, but it is separate, legally separate. Patricia made another note on her clipboard, her pen scratching aggressively across the paper. We will see what the county has to say about that. In the meantime, construction begins Monday. The contractors have already been paid a deposit. She turned and walked away, the group following her like ducklings. I kept recording until they disappeared into the tree line toward the HOA development. Back in my cabin, I immediately called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen. Felix, good to hear from you. What's going on? I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice level. Marcus listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. Okay, he said when I finished. First, they're completely wrong. I reviewed your deed myself. Your property is explicitly excluded from the Mountain View HOA. It was one of the conditions of the original land parcel when it was subdivided back in 2015. Send me that video you took. What should I do if they actually show up with construction equipment? Call the sheriff immediately. What they are doing is criminal trespass. But also, let me send them a cease and desist letter today. I will make it very clear that any construction on your property will result in both civil and criminal action. They said they already paid contractors a deposit. Marcus laughed. That is their problem, not yours. They should have verified property ownership before spending money. I will get that letter out within the hour. In the meantime, document everything. Photos, videos, notes with dates and times. All ready on it. Good. And Felix, do not take any physical action against them if they show up. Call law enforcement. I know you are angry, but we need to handle this by the book. I understand. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the day walking my property line, taking photographs and GPS coordinates. I also set up a trail camera near where Patricia and her group had been surveying, positioned to capture anyone who came onto my land. Thursday morning, I checked the trail camera. Patricia had been back with two other people, a man in a suit and a woman with surveying equipment. I downloaded the footage and sent it to Marcus. He called me within minutes. Did you see them on your property? No, I found the footage on my trail camera. Okay, good. The sheriff's department now has a formal complaint from us. Deputy I spoke with said they will increase patrols in your area. But Felix, this is escalating. That suit Patricia was with, that is probably their attorney. They are not backing down. They received your cease and desist. They did. Their attorney called me yesterday. Guy named Harold Pemberton works for a firm in Asheville. He claimed they have documentation proving your property is part of the HOA. That is impossible. That is what I told him. I am requesting they provide this documentation. My guess is they have nothing, but they have already committed to this project and do not want to lose face. Or they are just used to bullying people into compliance. That too, Marcus agreed. Sit tight. Let me handle the legal side. Friday afternoon, I was working on my laptop when I heard engines. Heavy engines. I looked out the window and felt my stomach drop. Two trucks were coming up the dirt road that led to my property, one pulling a trailer with what looked like prefabricated shed sections. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while heading outside. 911, what is your emergency? This is Felix Morrison at 4847 Woodland Ridge Road. I have trespassers on my property who are attempting to construct buildings without my permission. I need a deputy here immediately. Are you in danger, sir? Not physically, but they are trespassing and I have documentation that they have been warned repeatedly to stay off my land. A deputy is on the way. Do not confront them. Stay at a safe distance." I stayed on the line while walking toward where the trucks had stopped, right in the clearing where Patricia had been surveying. The drivers were getting out, along with Patricia herself, emerging from a black SUV that had followed the trucks. "Mr. Morrison," she called out, her voice syrupy sweet, "do not worry, the construction will be completed quickly with minimal disruption." "I have the sheriff's department on the phone right now," I said loudly. "You are trespassing and you need to leave immediately." Patricia's smile did not waver. "We have every legal right to be here. This is HOA property." "This is my property. I have the deed. I have a survey. I have a legal opinion from my attorney. You have been served with a cease and desist order. If you proceed, you will be arrested for trespassing." One of the truck drivers, a weathered man in his 60s, walked over to Patricia. "Madam, if there is a property dispute, we cannot start work. Our insurance does not cover that." "There is no dispute," Patricia insisted. "This man is simply confused about the property boundaries." "I am standing on my own land," I said, "and the sheriff is on his way." The driver looked at his partner, then back at Patricia. "We need to see proof of ownership and permits before we unload anything." Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "I have the permits in my vehicle." "And proof this is HOA land," the driver pressed. She hesitated just long enough for me to know she had nothing. "Madam," the 911 operator said in my ear, "the deputy is 2 minutes away." "They heard that," I said to Patricia. "You have 2 minutes to get off my property before you are all arrested." The sound of a siren in the distance made the decision for everyone. The truck drivers immediately started walking back to their vehicles. Patricia stood her ground, clutching her clipboard. "You are making a huge mistake," she said. "The HOA board will not forget this." "Neither will I," I replied. "And neither will the court when I sue you for harassment and trespassing." A sheriff's department SUV pulled up and Deputy James Wilson stepped out. I knew him slightly. He had responded to a call about a black bear near my property last fall, and we had chatted about wildlife management for 20 minutes. "Mr. Morrison," he said with a nod, then turned to Patricia. "Madam, I am going to need you to explain what you are doing here." Patricia launched into a speech about the HOA project, community needs, and how I was being obstinate and unreasonable. Deputy Wilson listened patiently, then held up his hand. "You have documentation that this property belongs to the HOA. Our attorney has confirmed it." "That is not what I asked. Do you have a deed, a title, a survey, anything that shows the HOA owns this land?" "We have our association map." "An association map is not a legal property document. Mr. Morrison, do you have your deed?" I pulled up the PDF on my phone and handed it to him. He read it carefully, zooming in on the property description and legal boundaries. "This is pretty clear," he said. "This property is not part of the Mountain View HOA. It says so explicitly in the deed restrictions." "Our attorney disagrees," Patricia said, her voice rising. "Then your attorney is welcome to take it up with a judge. But right now, you are on private property without the owner's permission. That is criminal trespass. This is ridiculous. I am an HOA president, not a criminal. Madam, I am not going to arrest you today. But I am issuing you a formal warning. You need to leave this property immediately and you cannot come back without Mr. Morrison's permission or a court order. If you do, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" Patricia's face had gone red. "This is harassment." "I will be filing a complaint against you, Deputy." "That is your right, but you still need to leave. Now." The truck drivers did not need to be told twice. They were already turning their vehicles around. Patricia stood there for another moment, glaring at me like I had personally insulted her entire family lineage. "You have not heard the last of this," she said. "I am counting on it," I replied. "Because when I sue your HOA, I want a long paper trail of your harassment." After they left, Deputy Wilson stayed to take my statement and look at all the documentation I had gathered. He photographed the tire tracks where the trucks had been and took copies of all my trail camera footage. "This is pretty cut and dried," he said. "They do not have a leg to stand on legally. But people like that, they do not like being told no, watch your property. Put up more cameras if you can. You think they will come back? I think they have already invested money and pride in this project. People do stupid things when they are embarrassed." He was right. That weekend, I installed 4 more trail cameras covering different angles of my property, plus a proper security system on my cabin. I also had Marcus file for a temporary restraining order against the HOA, specifically Patricia and the board members, barring them from my property. Monday morning, Marcus called me. "We have a problem." "What now?" They filed a lawsuit. "The HOA is suing you for interfering with their property rights and seeking an injunction to allow them to complete the storage project." I actually laughed. "They are suing me for trespassing on my own land." "Essentially, yes. They're filing claims that your property was incorrectly excluded from the HOA in 2015, and that all land in the Mountain View area should be subject to HOA jurisdiction. They are asking the court to revise your deed." That is insane. Can they do that? They can file whatever they want. Winning is another matter. This is completely frivolous, but it means we need to respond, which means time and money. I think that is the point. They want to make this expensive enough that you give up. Not happening. I figured. Okay, we will file our response and also counter-sue for harassment, trespassing, and legal fees. I am also going to request sanctions against their attorney for filing a frivolous lawsuit, and we will keep pushing for that restraining order. How long will this take? Months, probably. Maybe longer. Courts are backed up, but Felix, we will win. Their case has no merit whatsoever. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into documentation and preparation. I organized every photograph, every video, every piece of correspondence. I also researched the history of my property and the HOA development. What I found was interesting. The Mountain View HOA had been formed in 2008 when a developer bought a large tract of land and subdivided it into residential lots. My property had originally been part of that tract, but the previous owner, a man named Walter Green, had fought to keep his land separate. He succeeded, and when the development was finalized, his 15 acres were explicitly excluded from the HOA. Walter had died in 2020, and his estate sold the property to me in 2022. The deed had passed cleanly, with all the same restrictions and exclusions. I tried to find out more about Walter, but came up empty. His obituary listed no immediate family, just mentioned he had been a retired forest ranger who loved the mountains. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for mid-June. I showed up at the Henderson County Courthouse with Marcus, dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents. Patricia was there with Harold Pemberton, her attorney, along with 3 other HOA board members. They were all dressed professionally and looked confident, which worried me. Judge Linda Crawford called the case. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression. "This is a hearing on the plaintiff's motion for a temporary restraining order against the Mountain View HOA and its board members. Mr. Chen, you are representing the plaintiff." "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Pemberton, you are representing the HOA." "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Chen, proceed." Marcus laid out the case methodically. He showed the deed, the property survey, the original subdivision documents from 2008, and the explicit exclusion of my property from the HOA. He showed the trail camera footage of Patricia and others repeatedly trespassing. He showed the cease and desist letter and their refusal to comply. Your Honor, this is a clear case of harassment and trespassing. The defendants have repeatedly come onto my client's property without permission, despite being warned both verbally and in writing. They have attempted to begin construction on his land without his consent. They have threatened him with fines and legal action despite having no jurisdiction over his property whatsoever. Judge Crawford looked through the documents carefully. Then she turned to Pemberton. Mr. Pemberton, what is your response? Pemberton stood, pulling out his own documents. Your Honor, the HOA disputes the validity of the property exclusion. We have evidence that suggests the original subdivision was improperly documented, and that all properties in the Mountain View area should be subject to HOA governance. What evidence? Pemberton shuffled through his papers. We have association bylaws that describe the boundaries of HOA jurisdiction. We have maps showing all properties in the area. We have testimony from board members about the intent of the original development. You have a survey, a deed, a title report. We have an association map, Your Honor. An association map is not a legal property document, Mr. Pemberton. Do you have any documentation that supersedes Mr. Morrison's deed? We are in the process of obtaining corrected records from the county. Judge Crawford's expression hardened. So you have nothing. You are asking this court to allow you to build on someone else's property based on an association map and your own interpretation of what should have happened 15 years ago. Your Honor, the HOA has already invested significant resources in this project. That is not Mr. Morrison's problem. That is your client's problem for not verifying property ownership before starting a construction project. Based on the evidence presented, Mr. Morrison clearly owns this property, and it is clearly excluded from the HOA. The restraining order is granted. The defendants are barred from entering Mr. Morrison's property for any reason without his explicit written permission or a court order. Violation will result in contempt charges. Next case. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Pemberton put a hand on her arm and shook his head. They left the courtroom quickly, not looking at me. Outside, Marcus and I stood on the courthouse steps. That went well, he said. They are not going to stop. Probably not. But now we have a court order. If they violate it, they go to jail. That tends to focus people's minds. I drove home feeling relieved but still tense. Something about Patricia's expression as she left the courtroom bothered me. I should have trusted my instincts. Wednesday morning, I woke up to the sound of construction. Heavy machinery, hammering voices. I looked out my window and felt rage surge through me. They were building the sheds. Despite the restraining order, despite everything, there were workers on my property. 3 prefabricated storage sheds already partially assembled. I called 911 first, then Marcus. The dispatcher said a deputy was on the way. Marcus sounded shocked. They are violating a court order. This is serious, Felix. Do not approach them. Let the sheriff handle it. But I was already dressed and heading outside, my phone recording everything. There were 6 workers, all wearing construction vests. A supervisor was directing them, checking a tablet. None of them were HOA board members, just hired contractors. Hey, I shouted. What are you doing? The supervisor looked up, confused. Building storage sheds. We got the permits yesterday, on my property, without my permission. Look, buddy, we just got hired for the job. You have a problem, take it up with the HOA. I have a restraining order against the HOA. They are not allowed on this property. You are trespassing. That got his attention. A restraining order. Nobody told us about that. Check with whoever hired you. Better yet, stop working right now because the sheriff is on the way. The supervisor pulled out his phone and made a call. I could not hear the conversation, but his expression went from confusion to anger. "You have got to be kidding me," he said into the phone. "No, we are not going to jail for your project. No, we are leaving. You can sue us if you want, but we are not violating a court order." He hung up and turned to his crew. "Pack it up, we are leaving." "What about the sheds?" one of the workers asked. "Leave them. I am not getting arrested over this." Within 15 minutes, the construction crew was gone, but the sheds remained, 3 half-built structures sitting on my woodland like ugly scars. Deputy Wilson arrived shortly after, along with another deputy I did not recognize. They documented everything, taking photos and measurements. "This is contempt of court," Wilson said. "They had a court order not to do this, and they did it anyway." "What happens now?" "We file charges against the HOA board members. They will be arrested for contempt, and you should probably get those sheds removed before they send anyone else." After the deputies left, I called a local demolition company. A guy named Tom answered. "I need 3 partially built sheds demolished and removed today. Can you do that? Today is short notice. It will cost extra." "I do not care how much. Depends on the size. Let me come look at them. Where are you located?" He arrived within an hour, looked at the sheds, and quoted me $3,000 for same-day demolition and removal. Done. "How fast can you start?" "Give me 2 hours to get equipment and a crew." "Perfect." Tom's crew arrived at 2 in the afternoon with a small excavator and a dump truck. They made quick work of the sheds, tearing down what had been built and loading the debris. By 5, my woodland was clear again, just some disturbed earth where the sheds had been. I documented everything with photos and videos, including the invoice from Tom. $3,000 in demolition costs, plus my attorney fees, plus the cost of all the security equipment I had purchased. I was keeping a running tally. Marcus called that evening. "I heard about the contempt. The prosecutor is filing charges against Patricia and the other board members. They are looking at possible jail time." "Good. Also, we need to send the HOA a bill for the demolition and all your other costs. We will add it to the countersuit." "How much are we up to?" "With my fees, the demolition, and your security equipment, about $12,000 so far. Plus we are seeking punitive damages for harassment." "Send them the bill. I want them to know exactly how much their stubbornness is costing them." The next day, arrest warrants were issued for Patricia, Derek, and 3 other board members. According to the local news, they all turned themselves in and were released on bond within a few hours. But the charges were serious: criminal contempt, trespassing, and criminal mischief. The story hit the local news that evening. "HOA board members arrested after violating court order" was the headline. The reporter interviewed Deputy Wilson, who explained the situation clearly and factually. They tried to interview Patricia, but she refused to comment. What they did interview was some of the Mountain View HOA residents, and that was interesting. About half defended the board, saying they were just trying to provide community resources. The other half seemed shocked and angry. "I had no idea they were trying to build on someone else's property," one woman said. "That is not what I thought my HOA fees were paying for." "They told us the storage project was on HOA land," a man added. "If they lied about that, what else have they lied about?" The news coverage seemed to spark something. Over the next few days, I started getting emails and even a few visitors. HOA residents who wanted to apologize, to distance themselves from the board, to assure me they had no idea what was happening. One couple, Frank and Sarah Peterson, brought me a pie. "We live 3 streets over," Sarah said. We had no idea the board was harassing you like this. Most of us did not even know about the storage project until we got an assessment notice for $200 per household." $200, I said. "Special assessment to cover the storage project costs," Frank explained. "But now we are finding out they spent thousands on legal fees and construction deposits for a project they had no right to do. People are furious." "There is talk of recalling the entire board," Sarah added. "Would you be willing to talk to some residents? Help us understand what really happened?" I hesitated, then agreed. The following Tuesday, I attended a Mountain View HOA meeting. The community center was packed, easily 100 people. Patricia and the board members sat at the front table, looking defensive and angry. When I walked in, the room went quiet. Then people started standing, applauding. Patricia's face went purple. "This is an HOA meeting for residents only," she announced. "Mr. Morrison is not a member and needs to leave." "I invited him," someone called out. "We have a right to hear his side." "The board does not recognize that motion," Patricia said. "The board does not get to decide," another person shouted. "We are the members, you work for us." The meeting dissolved into chaos. People were yelling, demanding answers, wanting to see the financial records. Derek tried to call for order, but nobody was listening. Finally, a woman in her 70s stood up. The room gradually quieted. "My name is Dorothy Hughes. I have lived in this community for 12 years. I served on the board before Patricia took over, and I want to know exactly what happened with this storage project." She turned to face the board. "Patricia, how much has this cost the HOA? That is confidential financial information." "No, it is not. We have a right to see the budget." "How much?" Patricia looked at Derek, who pulled out a folder with shaking hands. "The contractor deposits were $8,000. Legal fees so far are approximately $15,000. The special assessment was intended to cover it." $15,000 in legal fees, someone shouted. "For what?" "To protect HOA property rights," Patricia said. "Except it was not HOA property," Dorothy shot back. "You tried to build on someone else's land. You were told it was not ours. You did it anyway. And now you are being criminally prosecuted for it. Is that correct?" Silence from the board. Dorothy turned to me. "Mr. Morrison, would you please explain what happened from your perspective?" I stood up and told the story from the beginning. I kept it factual, showing the documents on my phone projected onto the screen. The deed, the survey, the cease and desist letter, the court order. The trail camera footage of Patricia on my property after being warned away. The photos of the construction that violated the restraining order. When I finished, the room erupted again. People were demanding the board resign. Someone called for an emergency vote to remove them. Patricia tried to adjourn the meeting, but nobody listened. Eventually, a vote was held. By a margin of 73-12, the board was removed and a new interim board elected. Dorothy agreed to serve as temporary president until proper elections could be held. Patricia left without a word, her face frozen in fury. As she passed me, she leaned in and whispered, "This is not over." "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." The criminal trial was scheduled for late August. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Torres, met with me several times to prepare. "This is a strong case," she said. "They violated a clear court order. They trespassed on your property. They caused damage. The evidence is overwhelming. I expect them to plead out. And if they do not, then we go to trial and I put them in jail. Criminal contempt is not a joke, especially when combined with trespassing and property damage charges." 2 weeks before the trial, Pemberton called Marcus. They wanted to settle. "What are they offering?" I asked Marcus when he called me. "They will plead guilty to reduce charges, pay all your costs plus $20,000 in punitive damages. issue a formal apology, and agree to stay away from your property permanently. In exchange, you agree not to pursue further civil action. What about jail time? They would get probation, probably community service. No jail unless they violate probation. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see Patricia in handcuffs. But the practical part, the part that had been a lawyer for 20 years, knew that a settlement was cleaner. What do you think? I asked Marcus. I think you have already won. You have made your point. They are humiliated, they are removed from the board, and they are paying you $35,000 when we total everything up. If you want to push for jail time, we can. But trials are unpredictable. Let me think about it. I spent that evening walking my property thinking. The woodland was peaceful again, just trees and birds and the sound of wind. The scars from the shed construction were already fading, grass growing back. I did not need revenge. I needed peace, and I had already gotten that. I called Marcus the next morning. Accept the settlement. But I want the apology in writing, and I want it specific. They admit they trespassed, they admit they had no legal right to my property, and they admit they violated a court order. I will make sure it is in the agreement. The settlement was finalized in September. Patricia, Derek, and the 3 other board members appeared before Judge Crawford and formally pleaded guilty to criminal trespass and criminal contempt. They were sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service each, and ordered to pay me $35,000 in total damages. The written apology was delivered to me by courier. It was 1 page, signed by all 5 board members, admitting to every single thing they had done wrong. I framed it and hung it in my cabin. The new HOA board, led by Dorothy, sent me a fruit basket and a card apologizing on behalf of the entire community. They also voted to rename the community green space Walter Green Memorial Park, in honor of the previous owner of my property who had fought to keep it independent. I attended the dedication ceremony. It was nice. Kids were playing, families were having picnics, and nobody was trying to steal my land. Dorothy approached me afterward. "Thank you for being patient with our community," she said. "Most of us are good people. We just had terrible leadership." I know. I never had a problem with the residents, just the board. Patricia moved, by the way. She and her husband bought a condo in Florida. I think she was too embarrassed to stay, probably for the best. Over the following months, things settled into a comfortable routine. I worked on my cabin, maintained my trails, and enjoyed the peace I had moved here for. The money from the settlement covered all my costs, and then some. I donated $5,000 to the local land trust in Walter Green's name, figuring he would have appreciated that. I also got to know some of the Mountain View residents. They were not all bad, just people who had trusted the wrong leaders. Frank and Sarah became friends. We had dinner occasionally, and I even attended a few community events. But my favorite times were still spent alone on my property, walking the trails, listening to the forest, and knowing that every inch of it was mine, protected by law and common sense. One crisp October morning, I was hiking the back trail when I found something I had not noticed before. An old stone marker, weathered and covered in moss. I cleaned it off and saw an inscription. Walter Green, Forest Ranger, Friend of the Woods. It was not a grave, just a memorial stone. I sat beside it for a while, thinking about the man who had protected this land before me. "Thanks for fighting for this place," I said out loud. "I will keep it safe." The wind rustled through the trees, and I swear it sounded like approval. I stayed until sunset, then walked back to my cabin. Tomorrow I would start building that deck I had been planning. Maybe put in a proper fire pit. I had time now and peace and land that was truly mine. The HOA drama was over. Patricia was gone. The board had been replaced. My property was secure. Sometimes standing up for yourself is expensive and exhausting and takes forever, but it is worth it. Every time. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the stars come out over my woodland, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any courtroom victory. This was what I had moved here for. This was home. And nobody was going to take it from me. The months that followed were blissfully quiet. Winter came, covering my woodland in snow. I spent Christmas alone by the fireplace, perfectly content. The new HOA board sent me a card, which was nice of them. No demands, no drama, just neighborly goodwill. In January, I got a call from Marcus. "You are not going to believe this. Try me. Patricia is being sued by the original contractors. They are claiming the HOA owes them $20,000 for deposits and canceled work. And the HOA is claiming Patricia acted outside her authority as president. Did she? Looks like it. She apparently authorized the contracts without a proper board vote. The HOA is going after her personally to recover the money." "Karma," I said. "I thought you would appreciate that." I did appreciate it, though I also felt a tiny bit of sympathy. Patricia had been arrogant and wrong, but her life was pretty much ruined now. Criminal record, forced to move, being sued by multiple parties. It was a harsh lesson. But then I remembered her standing on my property, telling me I did not own my own land, threatening me with fines, violating a court order. The sympathy faded. In February, the local newspaper ran a feature story about the whole situation. They interviewed me, Dorothy, some residents, and even got a quote from Deputy Wilson. The headline was "How One Man Stood Up to HOA Overreach and Won." The story went semi-viral online, shared on social media, and picked up by a few national outlets. Suddenly, I was getting emails from people all over the country dealing with their own HOA nightmares. Some just wanted to share their stories. Others wanted legal advice, which I could not provide since I was not licensed in their states. But I did respond to every email with encouragement. Document everything. Know your rights. Do not back down if you are in the right, and get a good attorney. One email stood out. It was from a woman in Oregon named Jennifer who was being forced by her HOA to cut down 3 old growth trees on her property. She had been documenting everything, just like I suggested, and was preparing to sue. "Your story gave me hope," she wrote. "I was ready to just give up and cut down the trees, but now I am going to fight." 6 months later, she emailed again. She had won. The HOA had backed down and even apologized. "Thank you for showing me it was possible," her email said. "That made everything worthwhile. The stress, the money, the time. If my fight helped even one person stand up for themselves, it was worth it." Spring came and my woodland exploded with life. Wildflowers, new growth on the trees, birds everywhere. I spent my mornings hiking and my afternoons working on cabin improvements. The deck was finished and beautiful. The fire pit was perfect for evening relaxation. One warm April evening, I heard a vehicle coming up my drive. I was not expecting anyone, which made me tense. Too many bad memories of unexpected visitors, but it was just Dorothy along with Frank and Sarah. "We brought steaks," Frank announced, holding up a cooler. "Figured we would christen that new fire pit of yours." We grilled steaks, drank beer, and talked until midnight. They were good people. I was glad I had gotten to know them. "You know," Dorothy said, "you should join the HOA. I almost spit out my beer." "What? Not as a member," she clarified quickly. "Your property is separate, we all know that. But as an honorary member, come to the meetings sometimes, give us your perspective. You are part of this community whether you are in the HOA or not." I thought about it. "Let me consider that." "No pressure," Sarah said. "We just think you are a good neighbor, and we would like you to be more involved." "I will think about it," I said again. After they left, I sat by the fire, thinking. A year ago, I would have said no immediately. The HOA was the enemy, the source of all my problems. But that had been Patricia's board, not Dorothy's. This was different. A week later, I attended another HOA meeting. This time as a guest, not an adversary. Dorothy introduced me and people applauded again. It felt good. Mr. Morrison has agreed to serve as an advisor to the board, Dorothy announced. He will not have voting rights since his property is not part of the HOA, but he has graciously agreed to provide guidance on legal and property issues. I had not exactly agreed to that yet, but put on the spot, I nodded. Why not? I had the expertise and these were good people. Over the following months, I helped the new board navigate several issues, a dispute over fence heights, questions about tree removal permits, a proposal for new community landscaping. Nothing dramatic, just the normal stuff that communities deal with. It was actually interesting work, and I enjoyed being helpful rather than fighting. In June, 1 year after the restraining order hearing, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up. A young man got out, maybe mid-20s, carrying a folder. Mr. Morrison. My name is Thomas Green. I think you knew my grandfather, Walter. I stood, wiping dirt from my hands. I did not know him personally. I bought this property from his estate. I know. I am the one who handled the estate sale. I just wanted to come by and see the place one more time if that is okay. Of course. Come on back. We walked the property together. Thomas pointed out places where his grandfather had built things. A small bridge over a creek, rock walls to prevent erosion, carefully maintained trails. Grandpa loved this land more than anything, Thomas said. When the developer wanted to buy it for the subdivision, he fought for 2 years to keep it separate. He did not want houses and HOA rules. He wanted wilderness. I understand that feeling. I heard about what happened with the HOA board, trying to build on your property. Yeah, that was a mess, Thomas smiled. Grandpa would have loved that story. He always said the HOA would try something eventually. He told me whoever buys this place needs to be stubborn and have a good lawyer. I laughed. He was right on both counts. I am glad it went to someone who appreciates it, Thomas said, and who was willing to fight for it. That was important to him. We talked for another hour. Thomas shared stories about his grandfather, about summers spent hiking these trails, about camping under the stars. It was clear he loved this place too. Why did you sell it? I asked. Thomas looked sad. Money. I was drowning in student loans and the estate needed to be settled. I regret it sometimes, but I could not afford to keep it. And honestly, I could not have fought off the HOA like you did. I do not have that kind of strength. You have more than you think, I said. You handled your grandfather's final wishes, settled his affairs, and found a buyer who would respect the land. That takes strength. Thomas smiled. Thanks. Hey, would you mind if I came back sometimes, just to visit? I will call ahead, obviously. You do not need to call ahead. You are welcome anytime. He did come back several times over the following months. We became friends. He told me more about Walter and I shared updates on the land. It felt right, maintaining that connection. In August, I got a letter from Harold Pemberton, Patricia's former attorney. He was writing to inform me that he had withdrawn from representing the HOA defendants in the contractor lawsuit, citing ethical concerns. Reading between the lines, it seemed Patricia had asked him to do something improper, and he had refused. That was interesting. Even her own attorney had abandoned her. Marcus confirmed it when I called him. Word is Patricia tried to hide assets to avoid paying the contractor judgments. Pemberton caught her and withdrew. She is in serious trouble now, possibly facing fraud charges. She never learned. Some people do not. They doubled down instead of accepting they were wrong. The contractor lawsuit ended with a judgment against Patricia personally for $45,000. The HOA was cleared of liability since she had acted without proper authorization. Last I heard, she was filing for bankruptcy. I did not take pleasure in her downfall, but I did not feel bad about it either. She had made her choices. Fall arrived again, my second full year on the property. The woods turned brilliant shades of red and gold. I spent hours photographing the trees, the wildlife, the changing seasons. One September afternoon, I was walking the back trail when I encountered a black bear. We stared at each other for a long moment, then the bear turned and ambled away. It was a perfect moment, exactly what I had moved here to experience. That evening I sat on my deck with a glass of whiskey, thinking about everything that had happened. The fight with Patricia and the board, the legal battles, the arrests and settlements, the new friendships, the connection with Thomas Green. It had been exhausting and expensive and stressful. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. Because this place, this peace, this life was worth fighting for. My phone rang. It was Dorothy. "Felix, I wanted to give you a heads up. We are having a community barbecue next Saturday. You are invited, of course. But also, we are going to present you with something." "Present me with what?" "You will see. Just please come." "Okay, fine, I will be there." The barbecue was held in Walter Green Memorial Park. There must have been 200 people there, families and kids and dogs. Music was playing, food was grilling, and it felt like a real community event. Dorothy found me and pulled me toward a covered object near the park entrance. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" she called out. The crowd quieted. As most of you know, last year we went through a difficult time. Our previous board made serious mistakes that embarrassed our community and hurt people. She gestured to me. Felix Morrison bore the brunt of that. He was harassed, trespassed against, and treated terribly. He could have retaliated. He could have made life difficult for all of us. Instead, he handled it with grace and patience. And when it was over, instead of holding a grudge, he agreed to help our community do better. Dorothy pulled the cover off the object, revealing a wooden sign. It read, "Mountain View Community. Good neighbors respect boundaries." "We are installing this at the entrance to our development," Dorothy continued, "as a reminder that being a community means respecting each other, following the law, and never abusing the power we are given." "Felix, thank you for teaching us that lesson." People applauded. Kids were cheering. It was surprisingly emotional. "I did not do anything special," I said when Dorothy handed me the microphone. "I just stood up for myself and my property rights. We all have that right. We all should exercise it when necessary. But I appreciate this. And I appreciate all of you for holding your leaders accountable and demanding better. That is what makes a real community." More applause. Then Frank started the music again and the party resumed. I stayed for hours, talking to people, eating good food, feeling genuinely part of something. It was nice. As the sun set and the party wound down, I walked back to my property. My land, my home, my peace. Everything I had fought for and won. The next morning, I woke to find an email from Jennifer in Oregon, the woman I had encouraged to fight her HOA over the trees. "I wanted you to know," she wrote, "that my HOA case has inspired others in my community. 3 more families have stood up to improper HOA demands. We are creating a homeowner advocacy group. Thank you for starting this." I smiled. The ripple effect. One person standing up, encouraging another who encourages another. That was how change happened over the following months. I received similar messages from around the country. People fighting HOA overreach and winning. People standing up for their rights. People refusing to be bullied. I started a simple website to share resources. How to research property records, how to document harassment, how to find good attorneys, what your legal rights are. Nothing fancy, just information. The website got thousands of hits. I was not trying to start a movement, but apparently I had. In November, I was contacted by a journalist working on a book about HOA disputes. She wanted to interview me for a chapter about successful resistance to HOA overreach. "Your case is unusual," she said during our interview. "Most people give up or give in. Why did not you?" "Because I was right," I said simply. "I owned the property. I had the law on my side. Why would I surrender what was mine just because someone else wanted it? Many people would to avoid conflict. Then many people are training bullies to keep bullying. Sometimes you have to stand up, not just for yourself, but to show others it is possible." The book came out the following spring. My chapter was titled The Woodland Defender. It was a fair and accurate account of everything that happened. The book got some media attention, and suddenly I was getting interview requests again. I did a few podcasts and one local TV interview, always with the same message. Know your rights, document everything, do not be afraid to fight when you are right. 2 years after the initial confrontation with Patricia, I was sitting on my deck one summer evening when I heard footsteps on the trail. I tensed for a moment, then relaxed. It was Thomas Green. "Hey," he called out. "Hope it is okay I stopped by, always." He joined me on the deck, and I poured him a glass of whiskey. "I have been thinking," he said, "about this land and Grandpa and everything that happened. Okay. If something ever happens to you, if you ever want to sell, would you let me know first? I am in a better financial position now. I would like to buy it back, keep it in the family." I smiled. "Actually, I have been thinking about that too. When I eventually die, I am leaving this property to the land trust. It will be protected wilderness forever, never developed, never touched." Thomas nodded slowly. "Grandpa would love that. But until then, you are welcome here anytime. Think of yourself as a co-caretaker." "I would like that." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the woodland. This place had been worth every bit of the fight. Every angry confrontation, every legal bill, every stressful moment. Because in the end, I had not just protected property. I had protected something wild and beautiful and irreplaceable. I had stood up to bullies and won. I had inspired others to do the same. And I had found peace, real peace, in a place worth defending. The HOA drama was long over. Patricia was gone, living somewhere else with her legal and financial troubles. The board she had led was replaced by good people who actually cared about community. My property was secure, legally and practically. But more than that, I had learned something important. Sometimes the right thing is hard. Sometimes it is expensive. Sometimes it is exhausting. But it is always worth doing. As stars appeared above the trees, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To Walter Green, who first fought this battle. To everyone who stood with me. To everyone who would fight similar battles in the future. And to this land, this beautiful piece of wilderness that I was privileged to protect. The end of the drama was just the beginning of the peace. And that was exactly what I had wanted all along.